The mower you're looking at was given away because it has some unknown issues, and let's face it, no one gives away a working lawnmower. Free lawnmowers might be free to pick up, but you never know what kind of issues they have, and this one is not going to disappoint us. Despite its problems, hopefully we can get it going again without buying a lot of parts for it, otherwise this may not have been a very good investment in time or money. In today's video, we're going to be looking at this Troy-Bilt lawnmower, and the problem is that I just picked it up and I'm not sure what's wrong with it, but chances are pretty good that it won't start. To be honest, it looks to be in pretty decent shape, at least initially. However, when you take a closer look, you're going to notice a couple of problems with it. Now, I'm going to try and repair this lawnmower, but yours might be different, so this might not work on yours. So if things are not working out for you, like in the video, please ask about it, and I'll be glad to answer your questions. The reason we need to look over this machine first is because it'll give us an idea about how it was taken care of, and right now it's not looking very good. And even though the brake cable is beginning to fray and break, it seems to be working well. Now the strange part is that this mower has a battery box, meaning this mower once had an electric starter on it, but most of it's long gone. And if you thought that was all the problems, sorry to disappoint you because we're only getting started. One of the wheels is also different from the others, which means we'll have to replace it with the correct one later on. I know it's hard to read, but the engine was made in 2009, so there's a good chance the mower was too. Now I do want to try and start this mower, but first we need to check the fuel and oil just to see if we'll be able to. After checking the fuel, we'll then check on the oil and make sure that it's not too dirty and that there's enough in there. I know it's a pain to do, but to check the oil level properly, you'll need to wipe the dipstick clean first before reinserting it. Now the good news is that the oil is right in the middle of the marks, which means we have plenty of oil in there. But the bad news is that it's quite dark and will need to be changed later on. I'm also going to tip the mower on its side with the carb facing upwards and check the condition of the blade. Now if your blade is missing, it'll be extremely difficult to start the engine because the blade acts as a counterweight for it, so make sure that it's there. After that, we'll then prime the engine and then try starting it. Unfortunately, it didn't even try and start, so next we'll have to physically prime the engine with some fuel and then try it again. So as you just saw, it started and ran, but only after physically priming it. However, this mower is not going to make this easy because after about 3 minutes of running, it stopped all on its own. Now, just to confirm our findings, I did try starting it again, and yet again, it did the very same thing, which means there's a problem with some part of the fuel system, and I'm pretty sure that part's going to be the carb. While the mower is on its side, I'm also going to take off the blade for an inspection and balancing. Now this blade is in excellent condition, which means someone once cared about this mower but felt like it was time to let it go. Now before we go any further, I'm going to do a bit of house cleaning, and I'll start by taking off the unused battery box. There's really no point in having this battery box if this mower is not going to have key start anymore. Next, I'm going to drain out the very last bit of gasoline from the tank. But getting every bit of it is tough to do because of the way the tank is designed. In this situation, I'll just have to drain it from the outlet of the tank instead. I need to drain all that I can because I need to make sure that there's nothing wrong with the fuel that's in there. But as you can see, there's no water, debris, or anything wrong with it. It does have a bit of color to it, but I wouldn't have a problem putting this in my own personal mower. Now the air filter has seen better days, but if it was really bad, it wouldn't have even started in the first place. I'd also like to give this mower a quick spray and rinse before we start to take it apart. Now the most surprising part about this was that once I got done spraying the front plastics, come to find out it had been sprayed with gold paint. Now, I can't sell this mower with it looking like this, so I can either try and remove the paint or try to paint over it with black paint. I know it's probably not going to matter in the long term, but first impressions still mean something nowadays. My goal for this mower is to make it clean. I do not need it to look brand new though. Now, I have seen some examples of overly cleaned and detailed mowers for sale in my area, and even though they look nice, I just think they're trying to justify their extremely high asking prices. Of course, you could say the same thing for the ones I'm selling, and you have every right to. But then again, I'm trying to sell you a nice looking mower and not 10 pounds of grass and dirt on top of that mower. At least the ones I'm selling will be fully serviced and after a full test will be ready to mow. The last area we need to clean is the top of the engine along with the cooling fins. I know it would make more sense to work my way from the engine out, but it doesn't make sense when filming it. Of course, when you're doing your project, you can clean it the way you want to, and if you decide to not clean it, well, that is your choice to make. It turns out this one has quite a lot of dirt and debris hiding under the cover, so it's a good thing that we're cleaning it now. I almost forgot, after pre-treating the underside of the mower with my cleaner, I need to go back and give it a final rinse. Now, if you don't want to clean the top side of your mower, that's completely fine. However, at least clean the grass and dirt off the underside once in a while. This is especially important if you're not bagging or discharging your grass, but instead mulching it back into the yard. Now, once I'm done cleaning it, I'll give it a couple of hours, if not more, to let all this water dry up, but if you're in a real hurry, using a leaf blower or compressed air will help out a lot. The very first thing that I want to do is to replace that odd wheel with the right one. And at the very same time, I'll clean it and lubricate it just to make sure that it won't wear out in the future. Just be sure to clean off any dirt, grease, or rust from the axle before you apply your lubricant. Now, the non-driven wheels aren't so bad, but the drive wheels are a different story. Now, you can use whatever lubricant you have on hand. You don't need to use the same one I'm using. Next, I want to get to the carb, but specifically, I want to see why the primer isn't working. Remember, it only started and ran after we physically primed the engine with fuel. So this is the gasket that seals the air from the primer bulb, that way it can make it to the opening in the carb. If the gasket is broken or the filter base is warped, it could cause the primer not to work. Now, I didn't see anything wrong with the base, so I'm going to look at the gasket, but first, I'm going to take it off the engine. So this is when things get a bit weird. This is of course the gasket for the base, but if you couldn't tell, there's more than one there. Now, I have doubled up on this gasket before when trying to make up for a warped air filter base. However, they installed 3 of them here, which seems to be counterproductive because doing this will warp the base even more. Also, make sure this O-ring is still sitting on the intake pipe, otherwise there's going to be an air leak at the back of the carb, making the engine really tough to start. Next, we'll carefully take off this stack of gaskets from the carb, and who knows, we might even be able to save 1 or even 2 of them. Now, they seem to be all in one piece, so we'll try and reuse at least 1 of them later on. Now, even though the carb is somewhat working to deliver fuel to the engine, I think it's the main reason why it's stopping after a couple of minutes of running. And after seeing the bowl nut and what the bowl looks like, I think I know what we're going to find inside the carb. So what you're looking at is the float, and its job is to help regulate fuel flow into the carb. But what you'll notice is that the float is not parallel with the mating surface for the carb. What this tells us is that the needle seat that it seals against has swelled up and is restricting fuel flow. So if you combine that with the limited range and motion from the float, that means there's only enough fuel in the carb for about 5 minutes of running. Now, a lot of people have different views about the cause for this problem, so I'll say it in a very general way. If you use the wrong type of fuel in your machines and leave it in there for a really long time, then something like this could happen to it. And since the opening in the seat is now too small, we'll need to take it out and replace it, but there is a massive problem. Now, I'm pretty sure I'm doing it wrong, but whenever I replace these seats, I have about a 50% chance that it will work. And all the other times it's failed, and when it does, the carb will leak a lot of fuel, posing a real fire hazard. But if you buy your seats in bulk, they're really not that expensive, so I'm going to give it a try, and if it does fail, we'll go with plan B instead. So this time, I'm going to use my ultrasonic cleaner, and in it is a mixture of simple green and water. However, knowing what I know now, I should have used something much stronger. Now, while we wait for the cleaning cycle to finish, I'm going to replace the pull rope, which is beginning to fray in the middle. So after pulling all the rope out of the recoil, I'll then use some screwdrivers to keep it from springing back. I'll then cut the end of the rope, pull it out of the recoil, cut a new section of rope from my spool, and then begin the process of installing it. Now, the choice of pull rope is up to you, but I will let you know that there are good and bad choices when it comes to rope. If the rope is too thick, then you might not be able to get enough rope onto the pulley. But if you get a rope that's too small in diameter, then you run the risk of it breaking if pulled too hard. Now, doing it this way takes out a lot of the risk and hassle of having to wind the spring afterwards. Once the new rope is installed, we can then take out the screwdriver and then carefully let the recoil wind the rope back in. So after counting the number of turns on the pulley and confirming that it is enough, we can then install the pull handle to the rope. Now, it wasn't necessary to replace the rope, and that's because the old one wasn't that bad, but I like to think I was doing the buyer a favor. Oh, I also put a coat of paint on the recoil. Now it's a lot easier to read the numbers that are on it. So this is when we start to put the carb back together, and I don't want to discourage you, but the way this carb looked before, I don't have much hope for it. Now, the reason I say that is because even though the bowl looks a whole lot better, the rest of the carb still looks really bad. I'm still going to try and clean it the best I can and make sure all the openings are not clogged, but the needle seat is the part that I'm worried about the most. So just a bit of information about how the priming system works on this carb. When pressing on the primer bulb, it forces air into the bulb and it travels along that sealed passage behind the air box and inside the carb. That air then works its way into the carb and forces the fuel in the bowl out and into the throat of the carb. Now the two main failure points are the gasket for the air box and the large gasket for the fuel bowl. If there's an air leak at either of these two places, then the priming system will not work like it should or not at all. So after replacing the seat with a new one, you can see that the float is now almost parallel with the mounting surface for the bowl. But that's not the issue that I'm worried about, and it's more of a sealing issue with the new seat and the needle. I think it'd be better for me if I ordered the correct tool to install the seat and also a pressure tester, that way I can test the seal between the needle and the seat. Now to be honest, most consumers will not be ordering these special tools just so they can work on their own mowers. Instead, most will just opt to order a new carb, which is what I would also recommend you doing. I also checked and made sure that the fuel line was not blocked, which can happen with certain types of fuel. When I had the fuel line off, I was able to look through it and saw nothing that could be blocking fuel flow. And to be honest, a blocked fuel line is rather rare. I've only seen one in the last 8 years. So here comes the final test, which is to put fuel in the tank and see what happens at the carb. Now, this could take a couple of seconds or even a couple of minutes, and this time I'm not so confident about it. In fact, to show you my level of confidence about it, I'm going to put this towel under the carb just so I don't ruin the paint. And after only a couple of seconds, we have our results, and it's not good. And as you can see, fuel is pouring out of the opening on the left side of the air inlet, meaning we have a needle seat failure. So what now? Should I go back into the carb and try to get the needle to seal better against the seat? Or should I take my own advice and just order a new carb instead and not have to worry about this anymore? I will let you know that this mower is far from ready to sell, so having to buy a new carb isn't going out of my way. We still need to deal with that cable, sharpen, balance, and install the blade, and lubricate the rest of the wheels. And then we need to make sure it runs like it should, all before we do our testing and our final oil change. That means we still got plenty of time, but it doesn't mean we should waste it either. So my question is, what do you think I should do about that carb? Go back into it or order a new one? Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.